Welcome to
Bean Stuff.
Today on the podcast we have Michael Ryan, one of our guests today. We're excited, and we're in such a beautiful place.
Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
We're sitting now. This is the Dapper Wise Coffee Lab. Is that correct?
Exactly that. Yeah.
Okay.
It's used to be a conference room actually that we retrofitted into a place where we could do our QC and purchasing cuppings as well as classes for both our staff and the public.
Wow. I would not mind taking a class here.
Saturday at 10 o'clock, I believe.
Saturday mornings, 10 a.m. Yeah, and Elise Sewell, our director of education, she spearheads all that stuff. She does a fantastic job.
Awesome. Well, who is Michael Ryan? One question I had first is, how did you two meet?
Oh, we were talking about that, weren't we?
Yeah, we were. Yeah. In my recollection, and Paul, you can
That's right.
certainly correct me if I'm misremembering, but the first time I remember meeting you was going on 3 or maybe even 4 years ago when Caravan was putting on the barista competition. And Elise, actually, our director of education, she was competing, and we went down to Newburgh to just see the space and better understand kind of the space she would be in when she was competing. And then I was her informal coach since I had competed in the U.S. barista competition, but I didn't want to compete anymore. But I think that was the first time that our paths crossed formally.
I never realized why she did so well at the competition. She had inside information.
But it was a very different type of competition in the best sense of the word. So I don't know how good of a job I did preparing her for that. But she did fantastic.
She did. I remember afterwards she would come and she won a prize, and which happened to be to make a blend with Paul Allen.
Yeah.
And,
a rare privilege.
A rare privilege. We enjoyed ourselves anyway. It was great.
I'm glad.
We did.
Ah, that's lovely.
And so you're the director of coffee at Dapper Wise.
Yeah.
Green coffee buyer, hue grader, and you're also doing some consulting as well.
That is it in a nutshell.
Wow.
Good job, Reed.
That's a big nutshell.
It sounds more impressive when you string them all together in one sentence. It's really a lot more of just a little bit of this and a little bit of that on a day-to-day basis. But yeah. Director of coffee is sort of a nebulous title, and I get a little bit of flack from people, especially Germans. They just think Americans and their job titles. Yeah. Director of coffee, that's so grandiose. But it essentially amounts now to overseeing the intake process. What coffees are we going to purchase? How are we going to get them here? When are we going to offer them? And how are we going to tell the story?
Wow.
And once it's in-house and it's in production, I'm a part of the quality control team from then on. But ironically enough, once a coffee is launched, I more or less stop drinking it because I move on to the next coffee.
Right.
And so
we're spoiled, aren't we?
It's a funny dynamic when the staff will say, "What's your favorite coffee from our current lineup?" I'm like, well, my favorite coffee is actually the next Kenya we're getting that we haven't gotten yet. I'm really excited about it. So it's a funny paradigm. And that and being a Q grader kind of dovetails into that pretty seamlessly. I originally did that just because I love coffee. I also just love learning in general, and being able to do that was a ton of fun and has helped my wife and I launch the consulting business that we're doing on the side. It's in addition to the work I do here, because it dovetails so seamlessly. There's very little conflict or overlap or risk of life getting out of balance. I'm not at that stage of life where I'm so high in demand that I can't have a day job still. It's more of a side hustle, really.
Yeah.
That's a pretty cool side hustle. And it's called Threadbare Coffee Company.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. We chose that name because, strictly speaking, threadbare means worn out or frayed or even kind of broken down. But what's interesting to me, because we don't really use that word anymore, it's interesting to me is that you tend to run across it in older literature, and they're almost always referring to custom-made clothing that was made by hand from scratch for a specific person. We don't use it to describe T-shirts you buy off the rack. It's almost always in reference to that older way of doing things where the people in the process are never ever forgotten. Every stitch is for that specific person who's going to wear that jacket or those pair of trousers. So that sort of older, maybe you could say worn out way of doing things, I gravitate towards that naturally and think that there's a lot to be gained from thinking about things in a more people-focused way. So that's kind of what Threadbare came from.
Wow. I like the meaning behind that. It's not just a name. It's got some oomph behind it. So how did you, what did you do before coffee? And then how did you get into the coffee? Now I have to admit, I did a little bit of snooping before.
I don't know what
I
he's
did a
done.
little bit of snooping, and so I know that you two have something in common. You both worked at Starbucks for a little bit.
I knew I'd seen you somewhere before.
Ousted. Yeah.
But how did you, or what did you do before coffee, and how did you get into coffee?
Super good question. I am a failed mechanical engineer. I studied mechanical engineering in college and graduated in 2009, which was a fateful year to be looking for any sort of white-collar work. Nobody was hiring. I had an internship that the whole time I was there, they were promising me a job at the end of the internship, and come January 2009, they're like, yeah, nobody's hiring anybody at all right now. But it ended up being a blessing in disguise because I was a terrible engineer. I did not enjoy the process, or I should say I didn't enjoy the isolation that the process required. Engineering is not a thing that you do as much as a person that you have to become. And I was not that person and not really wanting to become that person. That's my perspective. It seemed like it was an all-consuming area of study, and so not being able to find a job ended up being a blessing in disguise because I had to pay rent, as one does after you stop living on campus, and just had heard that Starbucks was a good company to work for. And so back in the day, you could fill out, it was the same application, paper application, and Starbucks.
Paper?
Yeah, paper. It's
Is
this
that
thing.
Is that a thing?
Yeah, it sounds a little bit like this.
Isn't that what you listen to in a latte for making the milk? Yeah, the paper cuts.
The paper tearing sound, yeah. Exactly that, yeah. So I filled out the Starbucks application, and I left the line that said, which store are you applying to? I left that blank.
Interesting.
And then I photocopied 45 copies and then filled in the individual locations of all of the Portland metro area ones, and then I rode my bike up and down the Portland area, and essentially I applied for 45 jobs in one day. If you think about it like that,
That's smart.
And so the efficiency of being able to apply to so many locations with one application and hearing that it was a good company to work for, I got called back by one of the stores.
No way.
And ended up working at the one in the Pioneer Courthouse Square. If you're familiar with that one, it's a pretty cool place to work as far as Starbucks goes because it's in a historic building. It's in a super, for Portland at least, a busy part of town. Super interesting kind of amalgam of people. And I really enjoyed it, actually, more than I thought I would.
That's good.
So I didn't do it for the coffee, though. I drank white chocolate mochas. That was my drug of choice.
I'm impressed with 45 applications in one day. I don't know if I've ever heard of that many job applications at one go. I'm impressed.
That's the silver linings of there being so many Starbucks in the greater Portland area is you can apply to a lot of them at once.
Yeah. Wow. And then how long did you work at Starbucks for?
All said and done, it was 3 years as a partner.
Gotcha.
That's what they call their employees.
That's right.
Still remember my partner number. But it was a year and a half in the downtown Portland, Pioneer Courthouse Square Starbucks, and then I actually moved to Seattle because they were opening up a store inside the global headquarters in Seattle.
This is Starbucks.
A Starbucks inside the Starbucks headquarters.
Right.
Yeah, it's
Wow.
It's a little meta. Yeah, it's a little. It was no disrespect. It was super weird.
What made it weird? What was the...
Because you weren't serving the day in and the day out customers. You were serving a Frappuccino to the person who invented the Frappuccino.
Oh, that is...
And there was a unique attitude that it seemed like there was this sort of underlying assumption that if they criticized us, that would somehow make the whole company better. And so we got a lot of like laser focused attention, but not in necessarily the best way.
Yeah.
There was a lot of criticism, but it wasn't like, it didn't seem to give birth to anything fruitful. It just sort of felt like they were always picking on us. And I get it to an extent, like this is your thing, you invented it, and I'm not doing it right. Okay. But at a certain time, it's like, you have to realize that I only work here. I don't work in the other stores. So criticizing me doesn't really move things forward.
Yeah.
So it created an interesting dynamic, but it was good. It helped me condense my time frame for realizing that ultimately what I wanted to do with coffee was work with the coffee.
Right.
And being there allowed me to pretty quickly realize to do that at Starbucks, it's a 20-year trajectory if you want to be on the green buying team. And I just wasn't. I think Starbucks is a great company. I think they've done loads for the industry, but I wasn't up for signing up for a 20-year time frame to work with the coffee.
Right.
So
fair enough.
I needed to redirect after that.
You did well, and you beat me, by the way, by a long way. Your 3 years,
Yeah.
I only had 3 weeks.
Are you serious?
Yeah. We opened a little store in Palmerston North in New Zealand, and it was the first time there was lots of people, and they, for some reason, chose me when I filled out my little paper form too. But I just had Palmerston North on it.
Yeah.
And I got there, and they first put me behind the counter.
Okay.
And I was like you. I didn't realize probably at that point that I was more interested in the green bean, more interested perhaps making the espresso than actually serving the line of people that went round this whole square of Palmerston North.
Yeah.
And I sort of put this act on just to get through the day, and they loved my act. And that's all I did at Starbucks was behind the counter.
Yeah.
And I said, 3 weeks, I just can't. I'm just too stressed out. Anyway,
Yeah.
so you beat me. That's good.
What year was that in? That was...
That was it?
2000, I'm not sure, yeah.
Were you all still pulling shots manually on like a
We
Lamas
were.
Academia?
Yes, that's right.
That was before my time.
Whoa,
Those are the glory days.
Yeah, I know.
Or so I've heard.
And I wanted to be part. I wanted
glory
to be,
weeks.
I wanted to be part of those glory days because all I had was the ching 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 of the cash register.
I remember
That's
you
classic.
coming home one time and saying that there was a lady that got upset at you because
Poor lady.
you would yell out the drinks, and she came up to the counter and said, "Why is everybody screaming at me?" And I felt bad for her.
Oh,
Anyway,
that was part of the romance back then.
do they? I don't know. Do they still do that? They still yell out the
I think
orders.
they
and-
try to politely but resonantly proclaim it.
Yeah, reasonable. I like
So
that. I
not
like that. not
not yelling, but a little bit above an inside
positive,
voice.
yeah.
Yeah. And then so your journey from Starbucks to Starbucks, and then
Truly.
all the way to Q Grader and where you are now doing coffee consulting. What was did something like, what part of coffee really grabbed you and made you go, I'd like to dig a little deeper into that?
I always was fascinated, maybe a little bit obsessed with what I don't know and what I don't understand. That's always one of, if not the most alluring aspects of coffee. As we were kind of talking about earlier, things are changing.
Yes.
Even just with one specific thing like roasting, things are changing and expanding fast enough that there's always something new to learn. And that was really enthralling to me because on the one hand, I felt like I had found something I really enjoyed, and it was also mine. Nobody in my family, or at that time anybody that I knew, was into coffee the way that I was kind of accidentally falling in love with coffee. But so it was kind of cool. You feel like you stumble on something like, oh, this is my thing.
Yeah.
And my family, they all have their things, but I was always the one that was like, it took me forever to find mine. So finding that was fun, but then also just always wanted to understand. And I generally would say that firsthand experiential knowledge is, in my mind, superior to theory whenever it's possible. And so for me, that just was like, well, I'm a barista. Let's become a trainer. I'm a trainer. Let's become the director of education. I'm a director of education. Let's aim for being a roaster aim for being the green buyer, and just kind of working my way backwards up the supply chain, so to speak.
Yeah.
So eventually I'll probably go work for an importing company maybe, and then after that, live on a farm in
that's
Guatemala.
awesome.
I think, and then I'll retire there. I don't know.
Sounds good.
But I
I'll
love
come and see you.
just the substance and the texture that comes with learning things by experience rather than. I love reading, but that only takes you so far. There's a certain level of you just need to experience the reality of a thing to really grasp it and take hold of it. So I'm trying to do that as best as I can.
Do you feel like your background in mechanical engineering, do you feel like that ever bleeds over into coffee? Like you use that in a different way with coffee maybe?
Yeah, for better, for worse, maybe. I'm not sure. It has set me on a trajectory of thinking about things much more systematically than I think the average coffee person. That's too broad to be always true, but in general, I find myself taking that sort of tack where other people maybe aren't.
Yeah.
And so that's super helpful if you're going to step into kind of a vacuous space and fill it out with some sort of structure that can survive you moving on to something else.
Yeah.
That sort of systematic approach. So I have always been afraid of being like a hand in water. Like you remove the hand and the water just goes back to the way it was. I've always hoped to build enough structure so that it can outlast me at least by a day or two.
I like that analogy, yeah. And so with what you've been doing and going into green buying, and we were talking earlier, and you're saying you're always excited about what's coming down the pipe, what's new. When you're, and I guess it's different, maybe the scenario is different for whatever reason, but when you're looking at green coffee, what are the things that get you that are like, I'm going to look at that, or I want to get that in and try that? What excites you about specific coffees? Or
that's a super good question.
Yeah, it's a big question.
Yeah. In a second, I'm going to ask Paul the same question because I'm super curious. I think for a baseline allure, a coffee needs to be. I would describe it as being clean and sweet. Clean can mean a lot of different things. One is just like free from defects, primary and secondary defects, but also just personal preference. I love clean mouthfeels, like silky, creamy is great. Textured, gritty, fibrous is not my favorite. And so amount of body is less important to me as the type of body. And so I really enjoy clean coffees that have more like silky, smooth, maybe even creamy bodies. Yeah. After that, though, it's all just super interesting to me. I love just trying different things. And a lot of it ends up being who's going to drink this coffee, who's going to enjoy this coffee, and how many coffees like that do we already have, and is there a space in the offering? We tend to break up our coffees into categories, which is helpful, and also anybody who revels in the complexity of coffee would say that's maybe an oversimplification, but we tend to think of things as being comforting, nuanced, or fruity. Comforting being just like the coffee-flavored coffees that pair really well with milk and cream and sugar and that kind of thing. Yeah. The nuanced ones are more complex, where there's a lot of different flavors, but they're working together. But there's no one flavor maybe that's sticking out. And then the fruity ones are usually pretty obvious because the customer that doesn't like fruity coffees will say, "Why does this taste like lemon juice?" Yeah. I put cream in this and it curdled. And I, of course, enjoy those coffees, as a lot of people who are in my position do. But we try to have a fair spread of each. And so if we're too overloaded on fruity coffees, even if I love what I'm tasting, I'm not necessarily going to purchase it because we're already booked out for that type of coffee. So a lot of it is just that clean and sweet, and then kind of what do we need for our offerings. But Paul, I'm very curious.
Yeah.
What do you look for?
I was talking to one of our colleagues at Caravan, and a similar sort of question, because as right now Christmas is coming closer, and that brings a whole new sort of thought of, I guess you asked the question, so what's Christmas to you? And I am really surprised how, I guess, subjective it is. And to this person, it's pumpkin. To this person, it's summer on the beach.
Right.
It just depends what part of the world you're in.
Absolutely.
But we're here in America, and even in our little place, Newburgh, there's all these different, even on our staff, there's all these different ideas of what a good Christmas blend drink coffee would be.
Yeah.
And it's sort of, I've gone both realms of, oh, let's ask everybody and let's try and please everybody, to sort of, okay, thank you very much. And this is what it's going to be, though, this year. And for coffee, we often had a berry sort of tasting coffee from Ethiopia or something like that, because it just brings out the sweetness of the coffee.
Of course.
But like this year, I think we've moved a little more to a Brazilian coffee, which is changing the whole feel of it.
Yeah.
But what surprises me, when you put it on the packet, it's Christmas blend, it tends to sell. Because Christmas is just a wonderful time for most people.
Sure.
And so there's different nuances, as you say, and the subjectivity and the objectivity come through there. And I think we were talking to you before about, that's what's helped me as being like the Q grader side, has helped me understand what is it objectively, and what do I like myself, and how can I put myself in someone else's shoes and say, oh, that's why you like that. So this word on this form that says body, you really like body. Okay, you really like acidity, and both are good.
Yeah.
And I've learned I've got to sort of think about, what are other people like? It's not just about me, it's about these other people, and what are they looking for?
That's such a good perspective. A lot of my role is trying to, as best I can, put myself in the shoes of the people who are walking through the door. I know I have even heard people say, like, oh, we try to only source and roast coffees that we love. And I get that attitude of, like, I want to be proud of the product I serve, totally on board, but there's also like a tipping scale, like, well, what about the other 95% of coffee drinkers who love coffee and are probably also the people keeping your doors open?
Yes,
What
correct.
are you getting for them that maybe isn't your favorite, but are you willing to bring in something for them that you can still be proud of, but maybe isn't your preference? That's always been a tough balance to strike.
And it's interesting, as you think of those other people, you suddenly taste the coffee that you say is a good quality anyway, and you go, oh, I like that coffee. I haven't really thought about drinking that coffee very much, and here I am drinking it, and I wonder, is anyone looking?
We had a Peru that for some reason, I just did not enjoy it. And I went to one of our wholesale accounts in Damascus, Oregon, if you've ever been there. And they were doing air pots with French press brew, and they had that Peru, and I poured myself a cup of it because it was self-serve, and I took a sip, and I was like, darned if that's not delicious. What? I thought I hated this coffee, but in this context, brewed this way, it was great. And I would say I didn't like that coffee. I would say I don't prefer French press in general. And lo and behold,
There it was.
Yeah. And it was kind of like, is anybody watching?
I think that's against everything I've said.
One of the things we actually got it yesterday was we got a new filter for an AeroPress, and the reason I'm thinking about it is because you had said you don't like gritty coffees.
Yeah.
I wonder what process do you, like, Saturday morning?
Oh yes,
Michael's making a coffee. He's doing it for himself, just enjoyment. How do you typically make it, or how do you get it?
Yeah, for the longest time, we brewed a Chemex at home, and now we have a Bonavita, like, 5-cup brewer.
Yeah.
And it does a pretty good job. It's kind of, even at 5 a.m. when I'm drinking that coffee, it's still a little bit of QC, still a little bit of quality control, because if it tastes good then that's probably a good sign. There's been a few coffees that we've launched, and I've taken them home and I've brewed them that way, and at 5 a.m. I'm like, back to the drawing board with this one. But then the other stuff at coffees, it's this is for what it is, for how we're drinking it. It's It's pretty good. That's a good sign. In here in this lab, if we brew it on a Chemex, ground on an EK43 with 207.2 degree water, that's great, but it can be a little bit of a misdirect if we're not brewing it other ways, and maybe in a way that's more akin to how it's going to be brewed by the average consumer.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
and also at 5 a.m., I'm lazy. And if a machine can do it, let the machine do it.
Yeah, me as well.
That's right. And yet that 5 a.m. coffee, if it goes well, it's probably the best coffee of the day.
True story. Yeah. When like halfway through that first cup, I'm like, oh, yeah, today's going to be a good day.
Yeah.
Or if it's terrible, it's like today's already, I'm just going to go back to bed and start over because
Good
today's
place.
already shot.
Yeah. One of the things we talked about, I think, in another podcast, but we were talking about objectivity versus subjectivity in tasting coffee and how challenging that is.
Yeah.
I mean, like you were saying, body or grit. If you taste that, it's not your favorite. Is there anything that you do to help with like staying subjective? Like, is there? I'm trying to think of like, what would you do if you're like, I don't like this coffee, but I know that this might be a good coffee.
That's a good question.
If I know, but the first thing I think, that's where I actually like a form of some type to help me write down what this coffee is. And I get to the end, and sometimes when I add all the scores up, I'm surprised. This is a good coffee, and I wasn't thinking it was.
Yeah.
What is good about? I go back and say, oh, the acidity, the body, the balance. Something was good about this coffee. I don't. That's sort of.
Yeah.
That's a good question. I think for us, the categorization of the coffees has helped a lot. I mentioned the three. Those are the three for our single origin offerings, but then we also do have blends, of course. And what we expect and look for in blends is different than what we necessarily expect or look for in single origin coffees. But we always, when we cup for purchasing, we always establish what this purchasing cupping is for.
The goal of it, yeah.
And so that helps, I think, remain a little subjective.
Right.
And if we're saying this is for the lighter component of our espresso blend, that's what this cupping is for. And so we're not going through being like, oh, I wish it had more acidity, because we don't want that for even the lighter component of the espresso blend. We don't want it to be, face melting acidity like some coffees. So that helps us remain a little bit attentive to what the final customer is needing, and less about like what do I want to drink right now, right here in this moment. It's more like, well, this is for the light component of the espresso blend.
Right.
So frame it from there, and then we use. We actually don't use the SCA score sheet. We use check plus, check minus.
Yeah.
And then we cup it and we say, this is for, whatever. This is for a fruity category single origin. Check plus, check minus. Is it better than you expected? Is it worse than you expected? Or is it just what you expected? And for us, that if you have a tray in front of you and you say, this is for a potential fruity category purchase.
Right.
Check plus, check minus. And rarely do we give something outside of that. We have a plus, which is like, oh my gosh, I need this coffee. And we have minuses and we have X's. If you and sometimes we have to use the X's because you'll cup just a straight up defect. Right. It's like, that's not a check minus. It's just like X.
Yeah. I like that. I like the idea of cupping with a purpose that's dedicated to, like you said, like the light aspect or the body of an espresso, or those different pieces. That's helpful.
Even in the Q grading process, you don't cup coffee. You cup washed milds and washed East African and naturals. You cup them separately because it's not fair to cup a natural and say, well, I wish the acidity was more pointed and less fermenty. But also that's exactly how it's supposed to taste. That's
fair.
That's what people
That's
want
what
it
should
to taste
be.
like. So there is that level of like, well, port wine is supposed to be syrupy, so you can't complain if it's syrupy. That's not fair.
Right.
Pinot Noir is supposed to be delicate. You can't take a sip and be like, I don't like this. It's too delicate. Well, it's Pinot Noir. You gotta shift a little bit.
Calibrate a little bit for where the coffee's at.
Yeah.
It's like the good old Sumatra. It's a bad name sometimes, but that's what it is. It's Sumatra.
Yeah.
Well, Well,
a good
shifting
point.
gears just a little bit. We're still on coffee and you, but consulting. How did consulting come about? And I guess, and you kind of described a little bit in the name Threadbare, which I really like. But what kind of what made you want to focus in on that a little bit more?
There's a couple things. One, just logistically, I do a fair amount of consulting already, but I just sort of do it. And if I get paid, it's just like a personal check. Ta-da!
Yeah.
And that's great. I'm super thankful for those opportunities. But a lot of opportunities that could be generated from that. So like I go and I teach classes for Coffee Fest 3 times a year, and pretty often somebody will be like, oh, we could really use some help. Do you do consulting? And I would always say, like, I work for Dapper Wise, and you could hire Dapper Wise. And they always would be like, nah. So it just struck me as a missed opportunity and in my mind, those are the people that I would love to help the most, the people who are a little bit more isolated. Because in Portland, and I don't know how it is in Newburgh, but in the greater Portland area, we take it almost for granted that there's a plethora of people we could ask resources. But if you go too far outside the city limits, it drops off pretty fast. And most of the people that I teach classes to are from those areas where there's nobody for miles. And they have like the most simple question and nobody to ask it to. And so the idea of being able to help those people who are a little bit less connected, a little less surrounded by people like we are even in the greater Portland area, even out here in Hillsborough, we still feel the effects of the coffee culture in Portland. But then also looking for something that my wife and I can do together. Because she's a kindergarten special education teacher. But she worked at Insomnia for a couple of years and was even the lead trainer at one of the stores. And so she knows her way around a cupping table. Her palate is better than mine, actually.
It doesn't surprise me.
Maybe, yeah.
I know.
It doesn't surprise me at all. She won't admit it.
She's not a Q grader yet.
She's not a Q grader.
Just a natural Q
I've had
grader.
more, I've had more training, but she has more natural capability.
Yeah.
Hand over fist. She just blows me out of the water, which is super fun. So I love cupping with her because she's always like, oh, this one's the best one. I'm like, I agree, but she's just like picks it out so easily. I had to think about it for a long time, and she's just like, "Oh, that one for sure." I'm like, "I agree, but how did you do that so fast?" So we're always looking for opportunities to be able to do more things together, and hopes that we don't just live sort of parallel lives alongside one another, but intersecting lives as often as possible. So we got to go to China in August together, which was nuts.
And how long were you in China for?
Just shy of 2 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah, we got back and Christina started her first day of school like 6 hours later.
No way.
So don't do that again.
Okay.
But otherwise it was great.
Yeah.
And did you have people there that you knew you were going to see, or you just
Yeah.
went and found, here it is?
Oh goodness, I'm not that adventurous.
Oh, sorry,
you
neither
give me
am I.
way too much credit. Yeah, no, a friend of a friend is doing some work in China, and they had sent me some samples of coffee produced in Yunnan. And I don't know if you all have had coffee from. It's in the southern part of China.
I don't think I have.
I've got a cupping at Harvest soon from. We're talking about the same thing?
I might be there.
Okay.
There we go.
We're going on Thursday.
Okay, it's like in 2 days, Thursday.
No, I don't think so. I think it's the beginning of November or something.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll probably be there.
Okay.
Cool. Let me know. Let me know just in case they forget to tell me what the final
Okay.
date is. Yeah. So a friend of a friend, one of our coworkers, he had a connection, and they sent us some samples, and it was, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that I was the first person to give them specific constructive feedback, whereas the feedback they had gotten before was very like, but no, we don't want any, but not very helpful, if that
Right.
makes sense. And so I hope I was honest and tactful, but it led to them asking me to come out. And I already do a fair amount of travel for green buying at Dapper Wise, and so I kind of responded and I said, 2 weeks, another 2 weeks apart from my wife, I probably would only accept if she could come as well. And then they responded and they're like, yeah,
that's awesome.
both come. It's like,
Nice.
that's ideal. So that was super, super fun. I get to travel for green buying stuff, but getting to travel with my wife to coffee
Special.
farms.
Yeah.
Especially when she can taste so well anyway.
Yeah. Well, and people kept asking like, well, what are you going to do while Michael's consulting? I was like, no, we're doing this together. We're consulting together because she does barista training. She's got a great palate.
That's awesome.
And maybe some of the more nitty gritty specific technical stuff, but she knows good coffee when she tastes it.
Yeah.
And she can say, oh, this tastes metallic. Yes, it does. This tastes fermenty. Yeah. Is there severe insect damage? Yes, there is. I can taste it. Yes, there are more than 2 holes in those beans.
I'm just interested in what sort of, we were talking about balance and acidity and body and texture and all that thing before. Before in China, this would probably be a generalization, but what sort of general coffees did you taste? What were they like?
They are akin to what a washed Sumatra would probably taste like if it was washed and not wet hulled.
Yes.
And then sometimes in the realm of like a decent pulp natural Brazil. So with the people that I'm working with, they're trying to elevate the coffee that they are involved in to an 86, being able to consistently produce things that are 86 and above.
And what's an 86 and above?
86 and above. We're talking about the SCA score sheet then. And 86 is not the threshold for specialty, but it seems to be a sort of unofficial threshold for something that's pretty special. That pretty much everybody will, anybody who cups coffee on a regular basis would cup that and be like, that's a good coffee.
Yeah.
And whatever number they give it is maybe irrelevant, but anything that's an 86 or above is pretty special.
You know you're on good ground.
Yeah. And so most of the coffee that we tasted from Yunnan was not. It was specialty, but not special. And so we're working with them to get some feedback. We actually have created an initiative that we're calling Project 86 Plus, and the goal is to prepare Yunnan coffee for the global market, and the intent is to connect them with feedback from people like myself, but in different countries, Germany, UK, South Africa, Chicago, which is a different country, and get them feedback from the people who buy green coffee for a living.
Yeah.
As much as I love the Q grading program, there's a somewhat of a disconnect because what they really need to know is, would you buy this coffee, and why or why not? And the people who are best suited to give that answer are the people who purchase coffee on a regular basis. And so if we can connect them with those people, get them feedback. At this stage in the journey, that is, I hope, more meaningful than this is an 83.75.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, cool, but would you buy it?
Yeah.
Well, no. Well, why? Well, because then conversation can happen.
Yeah.
Because right now that's what's happening. Their coffee is specialty, but they're having a hard time connecting with buyers and understanding why. So that's kind of the hope
good.
there. That's kind of what that consulting looks like. That's just one thing, but get to go to China.
Yeah, well, it's so special to be able to share with those people, people who are new to coffee, and help them in ways that are not just like, oh, here's what your coffee is. Now, go and make it better.
Yeah.
Or it's fine, but like to actually help build more of the industry around that and how they can actually begin to build a market for that. And that's pretty awesome. And you get to do it with your wife, which is the best.
Yeah, even more awesome. Yeah.
Hands down. Yeah, I wouldn't have probably embarked on it if I couldn't do it with her.
Yeah. And it's cool that you can delve into a passion with her as well. Like you can do coffee and together and travel. That's awesome.
Yeah. Super thankful.
Well, we don't want to take all your time tonight.
You've done well.
But I have one last question.
Do you? Okay.
I think it's a good one. But
We can edit it out if it's not.
Yeah,
that's
right.
true. This is my seventh to last.
Or if
No. For people who are entering into coffee, people who are
I know where you're going here.
oh my,
It's good. It's good.
people who are maybe at Starbucks today, or maybe who are thinking like coffee is something I'm passionate about, I want to do it. where would you direct those people? Like, what's the best place for people today to put in their energy towards coffee?
Yeah. That is such a good question. I actually teach a class on this at Coffee Fest because it's such an important question. I get asked a version of that question on a pretty regular basis from people, baristas out front, like, okay, I love this, but I don't want to do this forever.
Right.
And I would, in my mind, maybe this is me being a mechanical engineer, I break it into two distinct arenas. One is internal development, working on becoming the kind of person that a company like Dapper Wise or whoever you revere, Hart, Stumptown, Counterculture, whoever you revere, becoming the kind of person that they would want to hire. I think in coffee especially, we hire the people that we want to work with more than we necessarily hire the most qualified person. There's other industries where it's like that person can be a total jerk, but we still will hire them because they are just qualified up the wazoo.
Right.
Coffee's not as much like that. It's a little more like, yeah, sure, you have the qualifications, but I do not like you. And so I'm not going to hire you kind of thing. And so a lot of it is just, I would say, taking the time to become a more self-aware person. I know that sounds super peripheral to coffee, but everybody has sharp edges. It's just who we are as people. And if you're not aware of your own personal sharp edges, you will kind of blunder through life, hurting people with those sharp edges. And especially in your 20s, which seems to be the average age range for the people that we're maybe hoping to speak to. That's a great time to pause for long enough and just kind of to soak it up and think, what are my sharp edges? Not do I have them, but what are they? Because we all have them.
Right.
Yes.
And I would say, in general, adopting a ambitious sort of proactive stance in life, proactive but also patient. I meet a lot of people who are like, oh, I work at Starbucks. I want to do this for the rest of my life. Cool. What are you doing now? Well, nothing. Well, passion and purpose don't meet you sitting on the front porch. They meet you mid-stride 10 miles down the road when you've already been running for a while. And a lot of people that I meet don't even want to take that first step until they've got it all lined up. And I don't see that being the reality. From a more like technical standpoint, which is, I think, the way most people think of answering that question, palate development is the number one thing, which I wish somebody had said to me 9 years ago when I started in coffee, because palate development is something you can do no matter where you are, no matter if you're surrounded by fellow coffee nerds or you're the only one on your staff.
Right.
And whether it's expansion, like cuppings are great, or objective, like triangulations, where two samples are the same and one of them is different. There's a right and wrong answer. Cupping's great, but there's no right or wrong answer in cupping. Triangulations are also great because there is a right or a wrong answer. And if you have a killer palate, you can do anything.
Yeah.
Within reason. If you want to be a roaster, being able to tell the difference between two roasts,
That's helpful.
pretty important.
Yeah.
So that sort of just palate development would be the first thing, because it lays the foundation for everything else. And I've met a lot of qualified, lovely, competent barista competitors. They have terrible palates, and they serve the worst coffee. And they also have the most sharp edges, and they're just hard to work with. But everybody is just like, oh, this person. It's like, oh, they're actually really hard to work with. Because they haven't done those things that I mentioned.
Yeah, no, I like that. I think that's
good.
that self-awareness of just who you are, what you are, and being proactive instead of reactive. And
I think to me, self-awareness is the beginning of others' awareness, and others' awareness is the beginning of compassion, like real, true compassion. Because if you don't understand yourself, you can't really understand anybody else. And if you can't understand somebody else, your compassion is going to be shallow at best. But if you really understand that person, that compassion just comes naturally by the bucket loads, because you really understand the person And that's hard to do if you don't understand yourself at all. They all, in my mind, they all flow together.
Yeah.
And I think we could use a little more compassion in this world, in this industry.
No, I love that. Yeah. I think that was a perfect answer. So we'll put some links and stuff everywhere that links are available. But what are some ways that people can stay in touch with what you and your wife are doing, and then with Dapper and Wise or the different things you have going on?
Yeah, Dapper and Wise is on all the medias, all the Instagrams. Our website is not up and running yet, but we are doing for Threadbare Coffee Company. We're doing an Instagram feed right now that we're slowly building up. That's not my particular passion or gifting, so we're building it up little by little. But it's just at Threadbare Coffee. But we're trying to populate it with things that are relevant to the current stage where things are at as far as like consulting and stuff. So it's not like a every day or even every week post right now because I'm not consulting every single day or every single week. So trying to populate it with good, worthwhile things, but still kind of figuring that out. And then I'm also personally on social media. I post on Instagram a lot more than anything else. So just Michael CM Ryan is my Instagram handle. I have 2 middle names.
Gotcha.
Hence Michael Ryan was already taken, apparently. That's not.
I was the same. Paul Allen, it was already taken.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
It's hard with some of those more traditional strong names.
Yes, I like
that's
that.
already taken.
Yeah.
Oh,
How can that be? I'm Paul Allen.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It has just truly been an honor. And
thanks for having me. It's fun.
Yeah.
Hopefully I didn't talk too much.
No, it's good.
I love this stuff, so it's getting me going, and it's hard to stop.
Well, and we can tell you love it. It definitely
it
comes out in what you say and the way you talk about it. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thanks again.
Yeah.